Of some of David Bowie's hits from a career which spanned 6 decades.
Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he blew our minds. And there's a starman waiting in the sky. He told us not to blow it, 'cause he knows it's all worthwhile. Wonder if you'll ever know who's in the best-selling show. Is there life on Mars?
Ashes to ash and fun to funky. We know Major Tom's a junkie, strung out in heaven's high, hitting an all-time low. You shout it while you're dancing on the dance floor. Fashion, fashion, pressure, pushing down on me.
They chase him through the alleys, chase him down the steps. They haul him through the mud and they chant for his death, and drag him to the feet of the purple-headed priest. I'm a black star, way off my money, I've got game. I see right so wide, so open-hearted, it's plain. I want eagles in my daydreams, diamonds in my eyes. I'm a black star.
Well, let's talk now with Terry Pastor, who joins us live from Lavenham. He's the man behind the iconic artwork on David Bowie's Hunky Dory and Ziggy Stardust albums. Terry, afternoon to you. Perhaps share your thoughts today with us first.
Well, yeah, it is a sad day. I have to say, I was sitting up in bed this morning and switched on the TV, and I was really quite surprised that David had died. And I suppose, you know, he's the same age as me, more or less, but yeah, I knew that he'd been ill for some time, but it was a great shock.
So you're standing there because I know that you'll share with us some of your work. So tell us about it and the influence that he had on you and the work that you did.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, the influence he had on me was more a case of, you know, in the last few years, particularly with him becoming such a sort of international star, and the covers that I did for his, you know, 2 LPs, Hunky Dory and Ziggy Stardust, have become iconic. I mean, really because of the strength of the music of the records. But yeah, it was certainly just, you know, really of its time, I guess. I think all this sort of stuff is social history, really.
Absolutely is, as our camera zooms in on it. Describe the creation process of it for us, and what it was about him that you took into that art.
Well, I think really with you know the front cover of Ziggy Stardust. I mean, it was originally only these are larger prints. It was originally a 12-inch square photograph in black and white, and I had no real input from David about what he wanted done other than just coloured up, which I did with the airbrush with a little bit of retouching as well. And his jumpsuit, which I did in turquoise to make him stand out from the background. I think the original suit was in a very sort of pale greeny grey, which was a bit dull. So I think that really worked very well in that instance. And he never questioned about the colours, so he must have been very pleased with it, because it just went straight to print after I gave it to his manager, Tony de Vries.
Was he fun, inspirational to work for and with, Terry?
Yeah, well, he was, in the sense that he was certainly a man that he knew where he was going. I mean, David always struck me as someone that knew what he wanted, and he was, you know, very straightforward, you know, no side to him whatsoever, very easy to work with, in fact. You know, with doing the artwork, it was a pleasure to do, in the sense that there was no pressure from him. He just, you know, wanted me to just colour it up in the way I saw right, and he was very happy with that. So, as I said earlier on to someone, that he wasn't a big star at that time. He only became a star after the release of Ziggy, and that was good for me, because there was no pressure on me to work for someone with a big name. So I did it, you know, very easily because of that reason, in fact. That,
Terry, can you hold that one up for us so we can see it a bit better? Can you hold it in front of you so we can see it? Yeah. I mean, as you describe the colours,
sure.
Yes, I can see what you mean about it stands out better as a darker jumpsuit. Of course, it wasn't his music that inspired people and will live long into the future. It is his impact on things like fashion, photography, and art as well. I mean, how did that evolve through your career as well? The things that he was experimenting with.
Well, yes, I think that period, as I say, everything is of a period, and I think that period was really interesting and affected, you know, particularly a certain age group, particularly the age group that would have appealed to Bowie then, or Bowie would appeal to them. And I think he certainly was, in retrospect now, known to have an incredible influence on fashion and basically an overall look for things. And I think also these covers at the time were unusual, in the sense that a lot of artwork in that period was actually full artwork rather than photography, particularly with the star of the piece in a way to some extent insignificant in the shot. It wasn't like a huge face shot of him at all, whereas in fact Hunky Dory was you know, just a head and shoulders shot of him, and I think it was unusual that he decided to go for just you know, just a single image to some extent in the background.
While I let you pick up another one that we can take a look at, Terry, tell us about those times when you were able to work with him. I mean, the rock and roll lifestyle was at its height. He was living it, and he was in his prime, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, he used to come around to the studio occasionally, and yeah, I mean, he always sort of wore you know, fairly outrageous clothes, but yeah, I mean, he, you know, again, at that time when I was working with him, he wasn't that famous, and I remember on several occasions being in the pub next door to my studio in Covent Garden, and he would go unnoticed, in fact, which, of course, you know, a few months later after the release of Ziggy, he couldn't really do that anymore.
Well, Terry, we very much appreciate you showing us your works and talking to us about your memories, your experiences, and your collaborations with David Bowie. Terry Pastor, thank you very much. Let's just show you the scene outside David Bowie's apartment in New York. People there waking up, paying their respects, waking up and hearing the news of his death. He'd lived in the city for many years, and it was there that he died yesterday. So David Bowie was so highly esteemed in his native Brixton that his face adorns the £10 note of the Brixton pound, the currency designed to support the local economy there in Brixton. Tom Shakil is the general manager of the Brixton Pound, and he joins us live now. Afternoon to you. Tell us then about the influence on your area of David Bowie.
Well, I mean, he is probably Brixton's greatest son, and that's why when we created the Brixton pound, like the national currency, which features the great and good of the nation, the Brixton pound had to feature the great and good of Brixton, and I think David Bowie's the greatest and the best that we have, so he was a natural fit to go on the notes.
Well, was there still a connection with the area? I mean, as I mentioned, he'd lived in America for such a long time.
Well, he was born not far from where I'm standing now. So I'm standing in central Brixton, just opposite the tube station, and about half a mile up the road in Stansfield Road is where he was born. And he didn't spend that long here, but long remained an icon for the area as he grew as a musician. And I think the fact that he gave his consent for his image to be used on the Brixton pound note showed that he never forgot where he was from.
What do you use? Have you got one there to show us? What do you use them for?
I do, yeah. So the Brixton pound looks a bit like this. I hope you can get that in the shop there. So it's like a voucher really, which tries to promote the idea of shopping locally as opposed to in the high street, to try and keep money in the local economy. And it's been around since 2009. And as you can see, we're not just using any image of Bowie, but it's like the the most kind of iconic one that there is. And it really, in addition to trying to support local businesses, it also tries to challenge conventional thinking and orthodoxy about what money is and about what our high streets have to look like. And I think that's why Bowie's a perfect fit for it, really, because he himself pushed boundaries and he challenged conceptions of what it is to be a pop star and probably what it was to be a person in the 1960s, 70s especially. So yeah, it was a natural fit for us to put him on one of the notes.
I wonder, Tom, whether they're going to become collector's items now.
It's always been our most popular note, so he's on the 10 and we have other people from Brixton who are on the other ones, and it's long been the most popular. But yeah, it's fair to say that we have a lot fewer now than we did this morning.
All right, Tom, thanks very much for talking to us from Brixton there. Let's bring in Edward Adu, DJ and broadcaster. Various aspects of David Bowie's life we've sat and listened to there. The music.
The music. He was the eclectic meister. I mean, even in later life, he dabbled in electronica and other genres. I think that's what made him unique. He didn't stay in one box. And I was talking to a good friend of mine on the way in. I said, look, are there any artists? I know we're always bigging up Adele and Ed Sheeran, but a lot of artists today are plunked into their own boxes. Mm-hmm. If you go on iTunes or whatever, it's genre specific. With David Bowie, he wasn't about that. It was about music, and that's what made him creative and unique, especially through the Ziggy Stardust era, where, there was a man dressed up, in ladies' women's clothes, and imagine the uproar in the 70s, parents saying, I'm not sure if your parents had that conversation with you that, what's this guy, this geezer on TV, wearing, and he broke all the conventions in terms of like stereotypes. And I think it was beyond the music, but it's the music which opened the door and it made people think it's not about class, it's not about where you're from or who you are, it's about the celebration of the music, and I think that's what David Bowie was all about.
And he made it the complete picture. You talk about the fashion and the makeup and the art, mm-hmm. But it was all of that that mm-hmm. contributed to mm-hmm. him being such a great, which is why we now talk about him, where there is others in the past that don't have that legacy.
Especially with his, it's his last album, or his recent album, mm-hmm. Black Star. I mean, if you watch the video, it's him more or less blindfolded and other people around, and there's a lady with a rat's tail. It makes you think, hang on a minute, who on earth would actually kind of, direct or put a video out like that, and he wants us to think about society. It's beyond the music. It's about what's going on in our world, and we're living in troubled times. And I think you look at that video, I think it's Bowie at his best, saying, "Listen, we need to think about who we are, what we're doing, and what's next." And I think that's what makes him unique compared to other artists.
But so many other artists have been so profoundly influenced by him, haven't they? And today, with all the tributes coming, you go, wow, some great
people. Nile Rodgers, obviously, who
Yeah.
produced Let's Dance. I mean, Nile Rodgers, that's a brilliant example. Back then, disco was more or less mocked. The Americans didn't like it. Disco sucks. It was, vinyls were burnt and that kind of thing. And Nile Rodgers, it was a struggle for him to produce hit records, and David Bowie got him involved to produce Let's Dance, and that opened the door for him to work with other artists. So, Bowie was he believed in people, and I think he gave Niall that opportunity, gave him the spot to produce that record. He gave numerous other artists the opportunity, and not just the opportunity and the influence in order to get connected with music. And I mean, again, how many artists can you cite who has been around for 3, 4, 5 or more decades, and they've made some amazing music? I mean, Heroes, Let's Dance, Little Wonder, it wasn't as big as Let's Dance. It came out in the 90s. It was very kind of electronic, but for me, that stands out as good as Let's Dance, Heroes, and all the kind of Ziggy Stardust. I mean, when I woke up this morning and I found out that he passed away, I thought it was a joke. I thought, 69. I mean, he's done so much, and he's a South London boy. He's a Londoner, and he was so proud of that fact that he would jump on the tube. He wouldn't do the kind of razzmatazzy thing of jumping a taxi or a prima donna. He was far from that. He was a man of the people.
We didn't really know him that much, though. I mean, the word I might have used would be a bit eccentric, but because of his dress and the music. But he didn't give very many interviews. He was very choosy about who he spoke to.
I think that's why we respected him, because, a man of the people, he doesn't really... if you're a man of the people, you don't really want to give too much away. You just want to be private. You want to do your own thing. You want to make music. Ideally, that's what he wanted to do. Yeah. He didn't want to turn himself into this kind of paparazzi icon. He just wanted to get his music out to people and to spread his message. Which
and was
I think,
clearly loyal to his close friends, who we've heard a lot from today.
Yeah, loyalty. And again, how many artists, I mean, you can compare him to the likes of, say, Kanye West or the Gallagher brothers or whatever, and, it's about controversy, but with Bowie, it wasn't about that. He was just, as I said, the man of the people. And I mean, will we get to see or have another David Bowie in our lifetime? I don't think so. I think this is, it's the last bastion of those types of artists. And may he rest in peace. A great artist, great icon, and we've certainly got to big him up.
Thank you very much, Edward Adu.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much more still to come here on Sky News.